The violent crack of gunfire echoed through the small town of Willow Creek, Montana Territory, 1878, as Emma Clark watched with terrified eyes from her hiding spot beneath the porch of her family's small homestead. Just 12 years old, she pressed trembling hands against her mouth to stifle her sobs as the outlaws ransacked the home where her parents lay murdered. "Ain't nothing worth taking," a gruff voice spat. "Let's burn it and ride." The crackling flames were the last thing Emma saw before she fled into the night, her heart pounding with grief and terror. She had no idea that 10 years later, she would find herself caught in a desperate fight to reclaim a life that should have been hers all along. 10 years later, 1888, Emma Clark stood frozen at the small window of her room in the Dawson household, clutching the worn letter that had arrived just that morning. The elegant script announced that her Aunt Martha had finally tracked her down after years of searching. Emma had a family, a real family, who wanted her. The realization made her hands tremble as she traced the delicate handwriting. At 22, Emma had spent the last decade as little more than a servant to the Dawsons, the family who had generously taken her in after the tragedy. Generously, she nearly laughed at the thought. There had been nothing generous about the way they had worked her to exhaustion, kept her isolated, and pocketed the small inheritance that should have been hers. "Emma, get down here, girl," Mrs. Dawson's shrill voice cut through her thoughts. Emma quickly folded the letter and tucked it into her dress pocket. She would leave tonight. She had to. The Dawson home was quiet as Emma slipped through the back door, carrying nothing but a small satchel with her meager possessions and the letter from her aunt. The night air carried the promise of early autumn, cool against her skin as she hurried toward the stables on the edge of town. She had saved enough from the small wages the Dawsons occasionally remembered to pay her to buy passage on the stage heading east. "Miss Clark." The voice nearly stopped her heart. Emma spun around to find Benjamin Adams, the local ranch hand who occasionally brought cattle to the Dawson property, watching her with concerned eyes. At 25, Ben was tall and broad-shouldered, with sandy brown hair that always seemed to fall across his forehead despite his efforts to tame it. His quiet demeanor and kind eyes had always made her feel safe during his visits. "Mr. Adams," she stammered. "I didn't expect anyone to be about at this hour." His blue eyes studied her face, then the small bag in her hand. "Leaving town?" Emma hesitated. She barely knew Ben beyond polite conversation during his deliveries, but something in his steady gaze made her trust him. "I just learned I have family back east, real family who's been looking for me. I need to go to them before the Dawsons find out." Ben nodded slowly. "The Dawsons? They've not been kind to you, have they? They've kept me from knowing my own history," Emma said softly. "All these years I thought I was alone in the world." "I'll help you get to the stage depot," Ben said, taking her small bag. "It's not safe for a young woman to be walking alone at this hour." Relief flooded through Emma. "Thank you." They had barely made it 3 blocks when the sound of horses approaching made them both freeze. Emma's blood ran cold as Richard Dawson's voice called out from the darkness. "There she is, stop her." Ben grabbed Emma's hand. "Run." They fled through the alleyways between buildings, Ben leading her with confidence through the town he knew so well. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew closer. "She's stolen from us," Mrs. Dawson's voice screeched into the night. "Thief." "I've taken nothing that wasn't mine," Emma whispered as they ducked behind a water trough. Ben's jaw tightened. "The Dawsons are influential in these parts. They'll have the sheriff believing whatever tale they spin." "I can't go back," Emma said, her voice breaking. "My aunt is in Silverton, Colorado. She's the only family I have left." Ben's eyes scanned the street, then met hers with sudden resolve. "My horse is at the livery. Silverton's about 4 days' hard ride from here." Emma stared at him. "You take me, you barely know me." "I know enough," Ben said firmly. "I've seen how they treat you, and no one should be kept from their family." The livery stable was dark and quiet as they slipped inside. Ben's horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Rusty, nickered softly as they approached. "He's strong enough to carry us both for a while," Ben said, saddling the horse with practiced movements. "We'll need to push hard to stay ahead of them." As Emma watched him work, a thought struck her. "Why are you doing this? You could get in serious trouble." Ben paused, his hands stilling on the saddle straps. When he looked at her, something in his expression made her heart skip. "Maybe I've been waiting for a reason to leave this town behind too." Within minutes, they were riding hard out of town, the sound of hoofbeats swallowed by the vast Montana night. Emma clung to Ben's back, the unfamiliar closeness making her face flush despite their dire circumstances. She had never been this close to a man before, and the solid warmth of him was both comforting and unsettling. They rode through the night, stopping only when Rusty needed rest. As dawn broke over the eastern hills, Ben guided them into a small grove of cottonwoods beside a shallow creek. "We'll rest here for a few hours," he said, helping Emma down from the horse. His hands lingered at her waist for just a moment before he stepped back, clearing his throat. "They'll be expecting us to take the main road south. We'll cut across country instead." Emma sank gratefully onto a fallen log, her legs trembling from the long ride. "You seem to know a lot about evading pursuit." Ben smiled slightly as he unsaddled Rusty. "I worked as a scout for the army for a few years. You learn to move unseen. And before that?" Emma asked, curious about this man who had risked everything to help her. Ben's expression clouded. "I grew up on a ranch north of here, lost my parents to a fever when I was 16, been making my own way since then." Emma felt a surge of connection. "So you understand what it's like to be alone." "I do," he said quietly. "Which is why I couldn't let you miss your chance to find your family again." They rested through the heat of the day, taking turns keeping watch. Emma dozed fitfully against a tree trunk, waking to find Ben's jacket draped over her. He sat a few feet away, whittling a small piece of wood with a pocket knife. "What are you making?" she asked, her voice still thick with sleep. Ben held up the small carving of a horse. "Just passing time. My father taught me," said idle hands lead to trouble. "It's beautiful," Emma said, admiring the detailed figure. "You should keep it," he said, handing it to her. "A memento of your escape." Their fingers brushed as she took the carving, and Emma felt a flutter in her stomach at the contact. She quickly looked away, focusing on the tiny wooden horse. "Thank you," she murmured, "for everything." That evening they set out again, following hidden trails through the foothills. Ben shared stories of his scouting days, describing the vast territories he'd explored. Emma found herself laughing at his tales despite their precarious situation. "What will you do after you've delivered me to my aunt?" Emma asked as they made camp on the second night. Ben fed another stick to their small fire. "I haven't thought that far ahead." "You could stay," Emma suggested, then flushed at her boldness. "I mean, Silverton is supposed to be a growing town. There might be opportunities." Ben studied her across the flames, his expression unreadable. "Maybe I will." On the third day, disaster struck. They were crossing an open stretch of prairie when Ben suddenly pulled Rusty to a halt, his body tensing. "Riders," he said tersely, "coming fast from the west." Emma peered in the direction he indicated and saw a cloud of dust on the horizon. "Is it the Dawsons?" "Can't tell yet, but we can't risk it." Ben spurred Rusty toward a rocky outcropping in the distance. "We need to find cover." They had almost reached the rocks when a shot rang out, the bullet kicking up dirt near Rusty's hooves. The horse reared in panic, and Emma cried out as she felt herself slipping. "Hold on," Ben shouted, but it was too late. Emma hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the breath from her lungs. She lay stunned as Ben wheeled Rusty around and galloped back to her. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, leaping from the saddle. "I don't think so," Emma gasped, letting him pull her to her feet. Pain shot through her ankle as she tried to put weight on it. "My ankle," another shot whistled overhead. Ben scooped Emma into his arms and set her back on Rusty, then swung up behind her. "That's Richard Dawson," he said grimly as they galloped toward the rocks. "And he's brought men with him." They found shelter in a narrow ravine, dismounting to lead Rusty deeper into the shadows. Emma limped beside Ben, gritting her teeth against the pain. "They're not going to give up, are they?" she whispered. Ben's expression was grim. "It's not just about you anymore. They'll hang me for kidnapping if they catch us." "This is my fault," Emma said, her voice breaking. "You should never have gotten involved." Ben turned to her, his hands gripping her shoulders. "Don't say that. I made my choice." Their eyes locked, and for a moment the world around them seemed to disappear. Then the sound of voices echoing off the rocks pulled them back to reality. "They're searching the ravine," Ben whispered. "We need to keep moving." They spent a tense night hiding among the rocks, listening to the search parties combing the area. By morning, Emma's ankle had swollen painfully, and Ben's face was etched with worry as he examined it. "It's not broken, but you can't walk on it," he said. "And we can't ride double anymore. Rusty's too exhausted." "What are we going to do?" Emma asked. Ben was silent for a long moment. "There's a homestead about 5 miles south of here. An old trapper named Johnson lives there. He owes me a favor. Can we trust him?" "We don't have much choice," Ben said grimly. They waited until nightfall before setting out, Emma riding Rusty while Ben led them on foot. The journey was slow and painful, each step a calculated risk as they tried to avoid leaving an obvious trail. Johnson's cabin appeared as a dark silhouette against the pre-dawn sky. The old trapper was suspicious at first, peering at them through the crack in his door with a shotgun in hand, but his weathered face softened when he recognized Ben. "Adams, what in tarnation are you doing here?" "Need your help, Johnson," Ben said quietly. "And your discretion." The old man's eyes moved from Ben to Emma, taking in her disheveled appearance and obvious injury. With a grunt, he swung the door open. "Get in before someone sees you." Johnson provided them with food, shelter, and most precious of all, information. The Dawsons had spread word that Ben had kidnapped their daughter, offering a substantial reward for their capture. "Daughter?" Emma spat, her hands clenching into fists. "They worked me like a servant for 10 years while stealing my inheritance." "They're claiming you're confused," Johnson said, refilling their coffee cups. "Say you hit your head when you were young and sometimes don't know what you're saying." Ben's expression darkened. "They've thought this through." "What they haven't counted on is this," Johnson said, producing a worn newspaper from a shelf. "Read that notice there." Emma took the paper with trembling hands. It was dated 3 months earlier, and in the corner was a small notice. "Martha Wells continues search for niece Emma Clark, orphaned in 1878 Willow Creek Massacre. Substantial reward offered for information." "Your aunt's been placing these in papers across the territory," Johnson said. "The Dawsons must have seen them and realized their time was running out." Emma looked up, hope blooming in her chest. "This proves I'm telling the truth. It helps," Ben said cautiously. "But the Dawsons have influence. We still need to get you to your aunt." Johnson scratched his beard thoughtfully. "I might have a solution to that." The solution came in the form of a wagon with a false bottom, normally used by Johnson to transport furs to market. Emma would hide inside while Ben drove, disguised as Johnson himself. "The checkpoint at Miller's Crossing is your biggest concern," Johnson said as they prepared to leave the next morning. "Sheriff's men have been stopping everyone heading south." Ben adjusted the wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. With Johnson's coat and a liberal application of dust to darken his beard stubble, he looked remarkably different. "What about you?" Emma asked Johnson. "Won't you get in trouble for helping us?" The old trapper shrugged. "Been thinking of heading up to Canada anyway. Good time as any." Emma hugged the old man impulsively, bringing a gruff chuckle from him. "Thank you." As they pulled away from the cabin, Emma settled into the cramped hiding place beneath the wagon's false floor. Through a small knothole, she could see a sliver of sky and occasionally Ben's profile as he drove. The journey was uncomfortable and tense. Emma held her breath as they stopped at Miller's Crossing, listening to Ben's gravelly imitation of Johnson as he spoke with the guards. "Just heading to Silverton with my furs," he said. "Been a good season." "Anyone come by your place in the last few days?" a suspicious voice asked. Nobody comes by my place, Ben replied. That's why I live there. There was a tense pause and Emma could hear footsteps circling the wagon. Something heavy thumped against the wood near her head. What's under here? Framework, Ben said calmly. Wagon beds reinforced for heavy loads. Another thump, and Emma bit her lip to keep from gasping as dust filtered down through the cracks. All right, move along, the voice finally said, but keep an eye out for a young woman and a ranch hand. Dangerous kidnapping situation. I'll keep both eyes open, Ben promised. It wasn't until they were miles past the checkpoint that Ben pulled the wagon into a secluded grove and helped Emma out of her hiding place. You did it, she exclaimed, stretching her stiff limbs. They had no idea. Ben grinned, wiping away the dust that had helped age his appearance. I believe we're officially in Colorado territory now, just one more day to Silverton. That night, as they camped in a sheltered valley, Emma found herself watching Ben as he tended the fire. The flickering light cast shadows across his face, highlighting the strong line of his jaw and the gentle curve of his mouth. Something had changed between them during their journey, a bond forged through danger and shared purpose. What will you do after Silverton? She asked softly. Ben looked up, meeting her gaze. I've been thinking about that. And he moved to sit beside her on the fallen log. I thought I might see if there's work at one of the ranches nearby. If he hesitated, then continued more quietly, if you wouldn't mind me staying close. Emma's heart quickened. I wouldn't mind at all. His hand found hers in the darkness, fingers intertwining. I've never met anyone like you, Emma. You're the bravest person I know. I wouldn't have made it this far without you, she whispered. When he leaned toward her, Emma closed her eyes, feeling the gentle pressure of his lips against hers. The kiss was soft and questioning at first, then deepened as she responded. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathless. I've wanted to do that since the moment I helped you escape, Ben admitted, his voice husky. Emma touched her fingers to her lips, still feeling the warmth of his kiss. I'm glad you waited until I wasn't hiding under a wagon floor. Their laughter, soft and intimate, floated up toward the star-filled sky. The next day brought them within sight of Silverton, the small mining town nestled in a valley surrounded by towering mountains. Emma felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation as they approached. What if she doesn't want me after all? She whispered, voicing her deepest fear. Ben's hand covered hers. She's been searching for you for years, Emma. Of course she wants you. Martha Wells lived in a modest but well-kept house on the edge of town. Emma stood frozen on the sidewalk, staring at the blue door with its brass knocker. I can't move, she admitted, her voice trembling. Ben took her hand. Together, then. The woman who opened the door was in her 50s, with graying hair and Emma's same green eyes. She stared at the young woman on her doorstep, her hand rising slowly to cover her mouth. Emma, she whispered. Is it really you? Emma nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. Aunt Martha. With a cry, Martha pulled her into a fierce embrace. I've been looking for you for so long. When the orphanage said you'd been placed with a family but wouldn't tell me who or where, I never stopped searching. Over her aunt's shoulder, Emma's eyes met Ben's. He stood a few steps back, giving them space for their reunion, but his smile told her everything she needed to know. He would be there when she was ready. The next days were a whirlwind of explanations and revelations. Martha had sent telegrams to authorities in Montana, exposing the Dawsons' deception. The story of the orphaned girl reclaiming her rightful family and inheritance with the help of a brave cowboy who rode through the night to bring her home spread through Silverton like wildfire. The bank in Willow Creek has confirmed your parents' accounts are still there, Martha told Emma over breakfast a week after her arrival. The Dawsons never managed to access the main holdings. You're a wealthy young woman, my dear. Emma shook her head in wonder. I never cared about the money. I just wanted to belong somewhere. Martha patted her hand. And now you do. Her eyes twinkled as she glanced toward the window where Ben could be seen chopping wood in the yard. In more ways than one, I suspect. Emma blushed. He saved me, Aunt Martha, in every way a person can be saved. I can see that, her aunt said gently. "And I can also see how he looks at you, like you're the sunrise after the longest night." That evening, Emma found Ben sitting on the porch steps, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. She sat beside him, their shoulders touching. "I got a job offer today," he said without preamble. "Foreman position at the Sawtooth Ranch just outside town." Emma's heart leapt. "You're staying?" Ben turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "If that's what you want." "It's what I want more than anything," she whispered. His smile was radiant as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden carving, a perfect miniature of a house with a blue door. "I made this last night." "It's beautiful," Emma said, taking it carefully. "It's a promise," Ben said softly. "That one day, when you're ready, I'd like to build a real one for us." Emma looked from the carving to the man beside her, this cowboy who had risked everything to bring her home. "I think I'm already ready." When he kissed her this time, it felt like coming home, like the end of one journey and the beginning of another. 1 year later, Emma stood in the doorway of their newly built ranch house, watching as Ben rode in from checking the cattle. The setting sun gilded his hair and shoulders as he dismounted and walked toward her, his smile widening when he saw her waiting. "How are my two favorite people?" he asked, placing a gentle hand on her rounded belly. "Impatient to meet you," Emma laughed as the baby kicked against his palm. Ben swept her into his arms, mindful of her condition. "Not as impatient as I am to meet him, or her," Emma reminded him. "Either way, they'll be perfect," Ben said confidently, leading her inside their home, a home built with love and promise. On the mantel sat 2 wooden carvings, a small horse and a tiny house with a blue door. Beside them was a framed newspaper article describing how justice had finally caught up with the Dawsons, who now faced charges for fraud and endangerment. "I was thinking," Emma said as they settled on the porch swing to watch the stars emerge, "if it's a girl, we could name her Martha after my aunt." "And if it's a boy?" Ben asked, his arm warm around her shoulders. Emma leaned her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "After your father, James," Ben said softly. "James Adams. He would have liked that." As night fell over their small ranch, Emma thought about the journey that had brought her here, from the terrified orphan hiding beneath a porch to the woman she was now, loved, protected, and finally home. The cowboy who had ridden through the night to rescue her now sat beside her, his future entwined with hers. "Are you happy?" Ben asked, as if reading her thoughts. Emma looked up at the man who had risked everything to bring her back to where she belonged, not just to her family, but to him, to this life they were building together. "More than I ever thought possible," she answered truthfully, and sealed the promise with a kiss beneath the vast Montana sky.